Okay guys, now that we're done at the joiner, we're going to move over to step 4, which is over at the table saw. So let's take a walk. Okay, so I have my board here that I just jointed. I've got it marked with an X right here. So that tells me that that is the jointed edge. So that X is going to go against our fence when we cut it here on the table saw. Okay? So a couple things I want to remind you of on the table saw. We want to, well, first of all, we don't have to mark our board when we cut on the table saw. There's no need to get your tape measure out to measure your board. We already know, based on our plans, how wide our board is supposed to be, so we don't have to measure. The only reason you would need to measure your board is if your board was less than what our plans call for, so you're going to make your box a little bit narrower. So let's say that's the case for you, is you have a smaller board than what our plans call for. What you're going to do is you're going to measure your board, and you're going to try to get as much out of your board as possible. In fact, I might actually be in that situation with this particular board. It's going to be close. So let's say that this board measures at 5 inches, okay? And that's still with our rough edge on it. You want to probably take about 1/4 of an inch off your board, minimum. So if you have a board that's 5 inches, I would make it 4 3/4. And just go at an even 1/4 inch mark. There's no need to be any more accurate than that. It's not going to change the height of your box that drastically or alter your plans that drastically. So go to the nearest 1/4 inch of your board. Now obviously we're making it smaller, so if your board is 5 1/4 with a rough edge, you'll make it 5. Okay, so we want to keep it simple. All right, now a couple of things that may have changed since we went over the safety test. I have adjusted the saw a little bit. I've also put a new guard on here that's a little bit safer and helps prevent kickback a little bit better. So what we're going to do is first I need to unlock it so we can see that it's locked because the handle is angled downward. All you got to do is lift it up a little bit and it should be straight out now. Okay, and now it's loose, so I can slide it to whatever measurement I need to make it. Right now our fence is in the upright position, so it's sitting very tall. On our fence here, we have a little clear plastic window that's got two red pictures on it. Those are depicting the position that the fence is in. So there's one where it's sitting up tall, and there's one where this is laying down. So we want to use the one that our fence is in, the position our fence is in, to select our measurement. Okay, so make sure you pay attention to that, and then you look at that little window there to see which red line to use. If you use the wrong one, you're going to be off by about 1.5 inches. So if you meant to make your board 5 inches, well, it's really only going to be 3.5 if you use the wrong line. Okay, so this handle right here is a locking handle. What a lot of people do is they try to move the fence using this. And it's very hard to do because it actually pivots the fence rather than sliding it laterally. So by putting pressure here, it's actually twisting the fence and it actually bends this and it doesn't really slide very well. So what you want to do is grab onto something like right here, and it makes it very easy to slide because you're actually grabbing the part that's sliding on the fence. I wouldn't grab over here on the fence to try to move it because it kind of twists it and binds it and makes it harder to do. So the same thing, grab right here and you can easily slide it back and forth with very little effort. Okay, so I want to set this to 5 1/4. So what I do is once I get pretty darn close, I just take my fist and I kind of bump it just a little bit to get it right there on track. If you've come up here and used this before and you try to do this and just move it a little bit, it wants to slide farther than you want it to. So it'll go past and then pass the other way and pass the other way. So if you just use your fist and kind of bump it a little bit, you'll get very small movements and it'll move right where you want it. Okay? Now that's where I want it, so I have to lock it now. So I'm going to grab my handle again. In fact, I'm just going to use my thumb and push it down. Okay? It's angled downward, so that tells me it's in the locked position. Just give it a little wiggle and make sure that it's locked in place and it's not going to slide on it. Now we're going to set the height of the blade. So I'm going to grab my board, I'm going to set it to the left of the blade, and I'm just going to raise the guard up like this and set my board next to it to see how high that blade is sitting. And it's actually already adjusted for me. I need the tip of those teeth to be above my board or between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch. Okay? So whichever one you want to use, if you want to use the visual of the teeth, that works. Or if you know what 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch looks like, you can use that as well. It's about the same. If I needed to adjust the blade, I would raise or lower the blade using this wheel right here. And while I'm down here, I want to make sure that my blade is straight and nobody adjusted it out of straight. Maybe they were cutting an angle or something, or maybe they just accidentally grabbed the wrong wheel when they were adjusting the height. So you're going to grab the top of this wheel and pull it towards you. If it doesn't move, you're in good shape. That means it's straight up and down. Okay? All right, the guard does not have to be adjusted, but I want to talk to you about it just a little bit. This particular guard, which is different than Mr. Kennedy's guard. So if you're in Mr. Kennedy's class, you're going to continue to use the old method. This guard is a little bit different. There's no adjusting, like I said, that needs to be done, but it does have this splitter right here. So as you cut, the kerf of the board, or the kerf that you'll cut into the board where you're cutting, will actually go so that you have two pieces, and that splitter will be inside that kerf. Sorry, that's the vacuum system. So that splitter helps prevent those two pieces from being pushed back together and pinching or binding the blade. Okay? So that will also help prevent kickback, because what causes kickback is one of those pieces hitting the rear side of the blade, throwing it up and back toward the operator. So that helps with that. There's also a little anti-kickback device that's attached to that. It's got little teeth that will dig into the board if it goes up or tries to come back at you. Okay? So this guard has a few extra safety features, so I decided to go ahead and install that on our table saw. Now, everybody will be using a push stick when they cut their board, because all of our boxes are going to be less than 6 inches wide. So you're not going to start with the push stick in your hand. Okay? The board I'm cutting is at 25 5/8, the front and the rabbit side part. And you're going to cut all of your pieces typically at the same time. So you'll take your 24 1/2 or 25 5/8 with you. You've already rough cut both of them. Just bring them both here, and you cut them both so that they match exactly. And you don't have to worry about getting that exact setting for 2 different days, 2 different cuts. Okay. All right. So machine is set up. I'm ready to go. I'm going to run through this without turning it on first. So I'm actually going to move this back over so I can slide the board through. I just want you guys to see the process before I actually do the cut. Okay? So I'm going to have my board in my hand. I don't want to set my board on the table saw and then turn it on. Okay? A lot of people do that. Well, that board's really close to that blade. If that blade hits the board when you turn it on, so you reach down here like this, it's going to shoot it back and it's going to hit you. Okay? It could hit you in the face, in the arm, the chest. So we don't want to have that board out of our control. We have it in our hands, we reach down and turn it on, and then first thing we do before we set the board down is we get our body in the right position. So my table saw says left leg here with an arrow. That means your left leg is going to go up against that arrow, so you're touching the machine. You're kind of facing the other wall, so you're kind of sideways to the machine. And you're just going to kind of rotate your hips a little bit so that you're pointing in the right direction. So you're facing the fence squarely. Okay? My X, or my jointed edge, is going to be against the fence. My left hand is pushing to the side, so it's pushing against the edge of the board, holding it up against the fence. Okay? I'm also going to take my finger and my thumb and push down on the top surface of the board. So I'm pushing with my fingers here. So these 3 fingers are pushing up against the edge of the board. These 2 fingers are pushing down on the surface. Now, you can modify that however best suits you. just make sure you're putting a lot of pressure on the edge and on the surface of the board, okay? That's what causes kickbacks, is that board coming away from the fence or lifting up off the table, okay? So let's run through this now that I'm ready to go. I'm going to put my hand on the edge and the surface, and then I'm going to take my right hand and I'm going to start feeding the board in. I only grab the push stick once the entire board is on the table saw, so all of it here is hanging off. If I use the push stick to start, I'm going to lift the board up on the front end, causing a kickback. So I don't really have much control right now. So I'm going to hold it with my hand where I do have control. Okay? And you can push it like this or like this. Hand position isn't that important as long as you're pushing the right direction. Okay? So here we go. Feeding it in. Once the board is completely on the table, I'm going to reach over and grab my push stick while still controlling the board with my left hand. Never, at any point in the cutting process, do you let go of the board with both hands. That will cause a kickback immediately. Okay? Okay, so you hold the board down with your left hand, you're going to grab the push stick with your right hand. A lot of people put it all the way up against the fence. That's incorrect, because you can't put any more force that direction if you're already up against it. So you have to keep it away from the fence a little bit, and now you can keep pressure towards the fence while also feeding it through the machine. Okay? So let's start that over so we get a good smooth transition. Alright. Board in hand. Turn it on. Leg up against the guide bar. Left hand is controlling the board. Right hand is feeding the board. The board's on the table. I grab my push stick, put it on the end, and now my left hand comes over here and sits on this yellow sticker. And then you're going to keep watching the board as it touches or contacts the fence as you feed it all the way off the table saw. Okay? And now you're done. Each time you turn it off. If you have a cut-off piece, you can see the blade still spinning. Wait until it stops spinning, and then reach back there and grab that cut-off piece. If you need to lift the guard, you can do so to remove that piece off the table. Okay? Alright, now let's do the actual cut. So I'm not going to talk through this process. I'm going to just go ahead and set the machine up and make my cut. Okay, I do not have a cutoff piece laying there because I cut off such a small amount that the little piece that was left over just dropped back down into the table where all the sawdust and things collect. Look at my board and I want to double check to make sure that I have a good clean edge that looks just like my jointed edge or very similar to it. Okay, so that looks good. Now I know that it's square. I know that it's exactly the width that I set the machine to, so 5 1/4. So now I've cut my surfaces on the planer. I jointed one edge and I've ripped the other edge. Okay, so this direction I have all of those surfaces, or all of those edges and surfaces squared. Now my next step is step 5. I go over to the miter saw to square both of my ends. Okay? See you in step 5.